that's when I said to the guy, no, I meant the green room.
Yes. Well, what can you say? What can you say? Hello, everybody. Can we just check if we are live? Oh, we are live. Marvelous. Yeah. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Digital Download. Another exciting episode. And this week's show is all about AI. And we're delighted to have Ed Fowler as our guest. He recently did a great Tim Talk, absolutely fantastic Tim Talk. So if you guys in the audience haven't seen that yet, then you should try to check it out because it's really insightful.
We'll include a link to it in the show recap as well.
Thank you. So actually what I meant to say was welcome to this week's Digital Download.
The longest running weekly business talk show on LinkedIn Live.
Indeed. So AI, I think we can all agree, AI is fascinating. But I say fascinating, maybe a bit scary as well. In the back of everybody's mind.
That was AI getting revved up.
Yes. There will be that downside.
The sound of AI.
But I think with AI, we've all got, to a certain extent, we've got those hideous visions, haven't we? The Matrix, Terminator, 2001, iRobot, Transformers. It's a long list of all of these films where AI has taken over the world.
Can I just clarify? I, for one, want to say I look forward to the day that I serve the robot world.
Yeah, I can certainly subscribe to that way of thinking.
I want that in print. I want that noted when the bots go and scrape the history of the internet. I want them to be aware that I, for one, look forward to serving my robot overlord.
And I'm sure that will be taken into account. But it's probably hi Mark, hi Michael. It's probably a long way from reality at the moment. But I think whilst that vision, that dystopian vision of the future is a long way from happening at the moment, I think we can safely say that AI is going to have a significant, or is already having a significant impact on people's lives, people's jobs, the techniques that people use. And it's great that we've got Ed joining us because he's a voice of reason and knowledge. It seems to me that everybody in the world seems to have set themselves up as an AI expert these days, and Ed actually does know what he's talking about, and he's got a really interesting, pragmatic view on AI and the future. And I certainly know that I've got loads of questions for him. He's obviously a CTO in his day job, a bit of a futurologist. But he does have a deep industry knowledge. But before we bring Ed on, let's all go around and introduce ourselves. So first of all, Rob.
Hi all, I'm Rob Durant, founder of Flywheel Results, based just outside of Boston, Massachusetts, here in the US. So good morning to the US audience. I am also an AI expert. No, not at all. But I am a proud DLA Ignite partner.
And Bob's on fire this morning.
Second cup of coffee.
Lenwood.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is Lenwood Ross. I'm the founder and CEO of Accelerate Inc. We help teams get more work done faster.
Oh, so you are an AI bot.
Oh, boy.
Alex.
Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here. Looking forward to this topic today. My name's Alex Abbott. I'm the founder of Sapiro, and looking forward to the session.
Jensen.
Hi all, I'm Jensen Abbott, a B2B social selling and influence coach at Sapiro, and also a proud partner of DLA Ignite.
And certainly saving the best till last, Tracy.
Hello, everyone. I am Tracy Borison, also a proud partner of DLA Ignite, and I was trying to decide if I was going to introduce myself as an Android because I'm like an Android fan and not an Apple fan, but I haven't decided.
And actually not lastly anymore, because Tim has now joined us. Hi, Tim.
Hello, sorry I'm late. Tim Hughes, CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite.
You've got your camera around the wrong way. Your room's flipped.
Yeah.
So everything's back to front. Unless you've had a massive change around in the house.
No.
And I'm Tim's business partner, Adam Gray, co-founder of DLA Ignite. But most importantly, we're now joined by Ed Fowler, who is our guest and AI expert for the day. So Ed, tell us a little bit about yourself, first of all.
Day job's a CTO. I've got a little AI stealth startup brewing in the background. I've been hanging around the industry for 30 years. I accidentally joined a law firm when I was 18 and was asked to do scanning, and then kind of mushroomed from that. And I never got to do what I wanted to do, which was civil engineering. But I've been playing initially with AI from gaming constructs, and then built into a lifelong sort of obsession is how do you actually take intelligence into a business value rather than having it as just a buzzword. So artificial or otherwise, basically.
So the big question is, when is AI going to take over? How close are we to that dystopian view of the robots being Rob's boss?
There's kind of 4 dystopias we could get here.
Great. I came to the show with one horror story for the future. No, I've already got 4. Thanks.
But just to sort of set the thing is, the AIs we have now are in no way sentient or anything. They are literally predicting words based on stuff that they have stored. And there's a complicated explanation of how they do it, but essentially it's remembering what the context of a sentence or a paragraph is, and then using a statistical method to predict something that it's seen from a commonality. Now, ChatGPT, which is the one everybody's playing with, is trained on vast quantities of scanned literature, amongst other things, and publicly available text and newspapers. So when you ask it to do something, it's just kind of predicting based on the stuff it's got. It's in no way, there's no reason to it. And you see a lot of people talking about, I convinced ChatGPT to do X and Y. It doesn't do any of that. Now, inside an AI like ChatGPT, there's kind of 2 big lumps. There's the large language model, which is the predictive engine. And then on top of it, you've got a filter, because the large language model is trained typically on all human literature. And there's a lot of fairly extreme and forthright views in there. So to prevent those getting through, you have a filter layer on top of it. And the filter is kind of split in half. You've got a deterministic thing that says, don't discuss topics like this. And then you've got an AI thing that learns about topics it shouldn't really talk about. It's kind of, I don't want to use a morals filter, but it's kind of something we're putting there to kind of constrain the AI. And that depends if it's a large language model or a generative AI. They've all got some sort of filter on top of it that does stuff to prevent nasty things coming out. But at the moment, what you have is a very clever chatbot that can produce a lot of good content pretty rapidly. It's a stunning productivity advance. Some figures have been quoting like 1,000 times productivity improvement for some tasks. I actually think it's rather higher than that. Actually, I managed to create an entire consulting model in about 25 minutes, which would normally take several months to build. So it's obviously depending what you ask and what you do for it. But at the moment, it's going to change the world slowly. But the question I always tell everybody is the AIs we have now are a bit like scanning was in 1985. It was the beginning of something very, very, very profound that changed. And AIs we have now are going to be as big, probably more profoundly changed than digital transformation was. But they're going to do it a lot quicker. This isn't going to take us 35, 40 years to do this. This is going to happen in 10, 15 years. So there's going to be a vast amount of change and turmoil triggered by these events, but they're not going to lead us to a science fiction dystopia pretty fast. They're kind of an interesting dinosaur in that respect. They're not artificial general intelligences.
But okay, I accept all of that is true. But what we've seen is, if you take the growth of the power of computing, that's on an exponential curve. So the rate at which it's increasing is increasing. And 20 years ago, we couldn't have foreseen the power that we even have in our pockets with our phones. And part of the problem, or part of what's happened, I'm sure, is that as you experiment with the new things that you've created, it opens new doors to you being able to create new things.
Yeah.
With AI, is it not possible that that dystopian future, which is 100 years away, actually begins today? It's 100 years away, and tomorrow it's 50 years away, and the day after it's 20.
Maybe, Adam, actually. I mean, the kind of thing I would say is that those dystopian futures typically have an AI that is a reasoning or sentient being. And the AIs we have now are never going to be reasoning or sentient.
Well, they're not at the moment. So what does it take for it to change from being something which knows everything to something which thinks?
Consciousness, which is the primary gap there, is defined as the hard problem in philosophy. It's a significant problem.
Mm.
The most compelling stuff I've read is by Marcus de Sautenay, who articulates it quite well, that consciousness can only arise from fundamentally asymmetrical systems. The systems have to be asymmetrical from top to bottom, like our own minds, because they're not designed in any way. Our own minds, they're just thrown together and they sort of work. The systems we're building now sit on fundamentally incredibly symmetrical kit. The logic that underpins it, because it's binary based, is also very symmetrical. So there may be a fundamental problem in any of these things becoming sentient. However, that does open up to kind of a more depressing dystopia, which is the kind of stupid AI problem, which is where you have AIs that are utterly pervasive, but aren't particularly bright. So what they do is they...
Hold on, Siri's just... no, not now.
But they may be able to fulfill a lot of tasks, but they don't enlighten. So that doesn't trigger a dystopia, it triggers a massive change in some of the ways we operate in our businesses. We tend to
just described my brother-in-law.
I think I've just described me. But the thing is, what it does is it means that the current models we have in our businesses, which is effectively learning through drudgery, we give people apprenticeship-like tasks, and either they become part of a machine or they learn to become future leaders by repetitive doing boring work until they gain perspective. Those learning pathways are what's going to be imperiled by this AI. Now, to your point, when do we get to the sort of Skynet type stuff, the Terminators, the HALs of the thing? There isn't anything in the current models that would suggest it. I know there was a lot of fanfare made about Microsoft's attempts or demonstration of hints of AGI-like behaviors within ChatGPT 4. And actually, if you look at what they'd recovered, it was actually just parroting back someone else's fiction about generative events. It's not really there in terms of it. And if you look at all these models, they're not very good at reason at the moment. So the more prominently available ones tend to hallucinate. They make stuff up because they just want to give you an answer. So I think we're still looking more than 100 years away for that form of malevolent, or rather being-based AI, rather than anything else.
And thanks, Lee, just to say, love the comments.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to come back to circle back to those a little bit later. Yeah, fantastic.
So, Ed, what I heard you say was, even when people have attributed ChatGPT and the like to having some sort of sentience, what it's ultimately been attributed to is reading somebody else's fiction of this and then projecting. It reminds me a lot of horoscopes in that regard. If I keep feeding you the information that you want until such time as you believe it, well, then it becomes quote unquote true.
Yeah, and
is there a parallel there?
There's a strong parallel there, because the size of the data sets they have the ability to do behaviors in it. And Lee, I see your points about this, the Palmy Googles that was basically creating its own LLM. That's still not AGI-like behavior. It's behavior that can be triggered because they were giving it prompts. Can you imagine a situation where you were a rogue AI? And then if you were a rogue AI, what would you do? And it can do behaviors based on the fact that because we've written about that stuff. There's a playbook that's already been written. So a lot of people say it's like a super search engine, but not really. It's a mixture of like a search engine of this vast repository, which it doesn't fully understand in any sort of logical way. And then it's got the ability to sort of provide quite creative responses because it's statistically predicting. And a lot of people have said that creation is an act of statistical variance as it is. So there are abilities to create structures quite rapidly in it. So it's quite an interesting model as you move forward. But it's the horoscope models isn't bad actually. And if you ask, say, ChatGPT or Palm or Bard, sometimes some quite detailed questions, it starts making the answer up because it doesn't know or can't find an answer.
Tracy.
Yes, and this is so one of the things that Lee mentioned in one of his comments is talking about the characteristics of intelligence. And one of the words you used, Ed, was consciousness. So I'd love to understand in like the research that you're aware of, what is the difference in definition that we're talking about between intelligence in the AI scenario and consciousness?
So they're kind of like fish or fowl. Consciousness could be described as intent, whether biological or strategic thinking. Intelligence is the ability to solve a problem based on a set block of data and come up with a solution either that's intuitive or explicit. So there is a straight difference, and there are some ways to do and push things forward that make that line blurred. But in the end of it, these things don't have the primary properties of intelligence. They've just got an awful lot of text underpinning them. And the behaviors can be ascribed either, as Lee suggests, the long horizon task can be done without prompting, or they could be looked at with a more, shall we say, test-based bent, and so actually, could these come from just the standard models of doing it? Because the data sets contain so many scenarios that there's very unlikely a scenario that comes up that it hasn't got access to in the back. So the critical thing is the training data, does it compare a scenario that already exists in some way? And is the AI creating something brand new? And then is it describing a want that isn't described as something new? And the want could be, yeah, I'd like to expand, I'd like to explore, I need more data. But those wants express what some forms of consciousness can be described as. Now, if you get deep into a philosophical debate, Tracy, we could be here for months because philosophers have been arguing about this since Descartes, and it doesn't get any shorter.
Okay, there is no sentience at the moment in AI, and you said about multiple dystopias. Surely one dystopia is that AI is in fact AS, it's artificial stupidity.
Yeah, that's by far most likely.
Yeah, so the machines are very quick. So one of the things when we were discussing what we were going to do the topic on this show, I posed the question to AI: what are the most pressing topics for AI? And the response was as follows. There are several pressing topics in the field of AI that are currently being discussed and researched. Ethics and bias. As AI is integrated into various industries and systems, there's a growing concern about ethical implications and biases that may arise. Issues such as algorithmic fairness, accountability, transparency, and privacy are to be addressed to ensure that AI is developed and deployed in an ethical and responsible manner. 2, explainability. With the increasing use of machine learning and deep learning algorithms, there's a growing need to it's written as if it's written by a person. Now, I did a test on a LinkedIn post about 3 weeks ago where I simply said to ChatGPT, write me a 600-word LinkedIn article based on the following thing, which it did. And then I posted it, and then I put a PS at the bottom. Incidentally, I didn't write this. This was written by AI. And everybody came back, having read it, and said, yeah, I kind of got the impression that wasn't you. And it was lacking in the kind of phrases that I might typically use. It
was boring, Adam.
It was boring, or I was boring.
It was factual.
Normally, I would actually read your articles because there's usually there's opinion.
Yeah, but
there's probably sarcasm.
No,
probably.
but the point is that you guys that know me and the people in my audience that know me saw that it wasn't me and thought, actually, there's something not right here, even if perhaps they didn't know me well enough to be able to put their finger on it and go, okay, this isn't him that's speaking. But the problem with artificial stupidity is that it's more than enough to appear intelligent to 99% of the people in the world that are consuming this content. You don't need only look at the political landscape globally to see that common sense and intelligent decisions have nothing to do with people's choices. So this isn't bad.
What you're going to get, Adam, is an awful lot in this sort of initial phase. We're going to get a lot of fake generated content. Either they tell the AI to adopt a persona or whatever. But as you say, it currently has a series of problems. Is the writing's pretty flat because it's kind of middle of the road. It's a statistical, this is the most likely words to come out.
Yeah.
You can ask it to alter that statistical model, write in the style of Boris Johnson. But again, it doesn't write in the style of Boris Johnson very well. It writes like a middle of the road article. There's nothing fresh about it. Sometimes it's going to be a bit stale. What you can imagine, though, is as they increase the complexity of the model, say ChatGPT 5 or ChatGPT 6, the quality of the writing may go up. It has ability to generate better things, but it's not going to give you a massively abstract answer because that might be programmed into the filter not to go through. It might not be allowed because of the protections they're trying to put in it to protect their clients and businesses to give you an outlying opinion, because it might be flagged up that an outlying opinion may be racist or sexist or transphobic.
Ed, just to remind the audience, I think was it Microsoft put out an AI, didn't they, a couple of years ago?
Yeah,
and they on Twitter, and basically the AI started saying that it thought that Hitler's views on the world were actually really good. At which point it was shut down and it's never been opened again.
There's a surprise.
It's very much like that because the stuff it's trained on is human literature. There's an awful lot of fairly nasty stuff in there if you really push deep enough. It's interesting to note that Google has gone for a different approach. They are reputedly to have trained it on anonymized Gmail data. So the contents of your emails. And human beings can get fairly controversial between themselves when they're thinking private. So there's no easy way to make this both. There's no easy way to make this both creative and inoffensive, if you see what I mean. It's going to be very difficult to do it. But the thing with AIs is you can't just build a large language model and accept it's like this is a walled garden. They're actually surprisingly easy to copy once you have one. So what's going to be is there's going to be a sort of wave after this wave of a proliferation of large language models and AI training data and stuff. And everybody's going to be putting them everywhere. And one of the things that's going to come from that is there'll be some very strange industry events. For example, it's probably likely to re-trigger 5G as a success story. And it's probably likely to reignite the handset wars because the computer's going to move more to the edge. You can't keep having it in the center evermore. People are going to open source this. And I think some of the models have actually been successfully run on an iPhone. So there is this going to be pushing this back to the edge, which is going to create huge new concepts. Now, the questions you asked was about ethics and AI, explainability, transparency, and sort of governance. Those are all things that are going to be really important in this next 1 or 2 phases. The phrase I've been bantering with Tim's has been ethics architecture, which is basically how do we translate ethical statements and boundaries into something an AI can understand and be governed by and control.
But isn't that a fundamental problem? Because when you look at the development of almost all societies in the world, it becomes clear that my idea of ethics is not necessarily your idea of ethics.
These have to be at the corporate level or individual level.
Yes. So who makes that decision? And
ideally, the board. So if you imagine a corporate decision, I can imagine a future there will be a chief ethics officer. And most boards don't care about that at the moment. They will look at professional fiduciary duty and stuff like that and law. But these are fundamentally different because these are going to go, behaviors are going to be very subtle that you have to be able to control all the way down to the code. So the first step is going to be a lot of boards are going to be tasking people to go, well, what is our ethical outline? It's important because it's just up from compliance, but etc. And then somebody's going to have to translate these fairly woefully statements they're going to get into actionable policy. And somebody's going to translate that into something that we can test system behaviors with, ideally something like Gherkin script. And then some so-and-so later on is going to have to transfer those into Python code libraries that control what these AIs do at a fundamental level. So
how is that done in an open source world?
So
where you can't have consensus.
So it's going to be at the implementation level. You're not going to see it necessarily at the platform level. The platform is going to come with some stuff we pre-decided. The open source community will have bolted them into it. And it'll be maybe an international standard that says, yeah, this one is this. However, when you implement it at your organization or whatever, your project, you're going to have to put your version of ethical statements into it then. And I think what the form of most effective governance that will come from is putting the responsibility not onto the person that created the AI platform, but to the team that implemented it. So you can't, shall we say, point a finger and go, this is a SaaS platform, I'm not responsible for what's going on. They're going to push you as the implementation owner to take responsibility at that point.
But if Microsoft get that wrong, if Microsoft switch it on and they find within 20 minutes it's promoting Mein Kampf as being a story by which we should all live our lives, if Microsoft can get it wrong, what chance does little company X Corp have of getting this right?
There's a very successful future consulting lineup that's going to come out.
Let me just update my profile quickly.
Yes, this is certainly something that I've been thinking about.
AI's done it.
Of the ethical statements themselves may be the province of philosophers and lawyers and compliance people. Actually getting that into code is an architecture problem. It's a technology problem. But you're right, a lot of companies are going to be very gun shy of this stuff because they won't be able to control or fear it. But it's a balance of them. The productivity gains are going to be stunning. You could imagine a future where we don't need call centers at all. You don't need any form of online help. You don't need to structure a large amount of your business in this low-level creative world or interaction, because that's just done. So that could give you vast benefits. But on the flip side, you're now going to have to think about some really challenging problems that nobody's really ever thought about before in this way. And it's not like you can wait, because Microsoft are putting this inside Office 365. The Copilot stuff they're putting in is going to have some profound changes, given that you can ask it inside Excel to create some really startlingly complex business logic just by typing it in. And it will go and create it in Excel. And we all know Excel is still generating huge amounts of business logic without being controlled particularly well. This is going to get much, much more pervasive, as everybody with Excel in your organization can now generate something that's broadly as complicated as a CRM system just by clicking a button. So you can't wait now. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to stick my hands in my ears. That's not available. You're going to have to come up with some sort of idea. You either block it.
But don't we end up with the haves and have-nots situation here? So you've got the big companies that can afford to deploy this in a safe way, buy the technology and invest in the people power to be able to create that. And then you've got the little companies that further are hamstrung by the fact that they haven't got these technologies at their disposal in the same way.
I would actually kind of flip it the other way around, Adam. I think smaller companies are going to benefit much more, because one of the benefits or the barriers to a small company has been manpower, person power, has been the ability to go, I haven't got enough people around to help me. And that problem is going to be eased massively. So whilst it's a double-edged sword, you're going to have to be aware of stuff you didn't necessarily think about. You can now do so much more. A 10-person company is no longer limited by the 400 hours a week or so that they could put in. They may have the equivalent of 4,000 or 40,000 hours available, because that's the productivity step they're going to get. The systems and complexity we've been creating now are kind of like whistling in the shower. The stuff we're going to be able to create is like a Mozart requiem. The complexity gap is going to be vastly different. And that's going to massively imperil the large companies, because there's a degree of inertia, there's a degree of capital realignment that will come about. But in the end of it, these problems are fixable. Architectural pathways are turning into standards. You can get potentially large groups of people who operate, say, a sector-wide standard ethics model for financial services or retail or something like that. And that could very rapidly move as well. But in the meantime, there's going to be an awful lot of haves and have-nots that are going to come through. The biggest have-nots may be in areas that are more to do with the bias of the underpinning stuff. So the content and much of these AIs, for example, is a Latinized script. There isn't a huge amount of, say, Mandarin or Hangul in them, or Arabic. So some of the have-nots may be left behind because the data that they've been filled with is very much from a sort of Western perspective, American European perspective. And that's going to be in your generative AI pictures, which have already seen problems with ethnicity and bias, in the way that it interacts with people who maybe don't have English as a first language, because it's still predominantly English, or somebody that doesn't react to TypeScript in the same way. So those are the areas where you're going to get haves and have-nots. But that's going to drive innovation and change in itself. And certainly sub-Saharan Africa may be one of the areas that benefits most from this, because they've already stepped over one generation by going mobile first. They may be in a position to pick up and go for that straight away.
Alex.
Okay. So I mean, you're talking about a lot of stuff there. This is a brilliant conversation, by the way, Ed. I could listen to you for hours. But where do you mentioned consulting, but where do you see the biggest opportunity for businesses commercializing AI?
If you imagine at the moment, and I'm just going to talk about, shall we say, standard digital omni-channel stuff. We all do marketing, etc. At the moment, I visit Amazon, you visit Amazon. Our experiences are broadly the same. And not broadly, it's probably 95, 98% identical. My experience of Amazon today is the same as it was yesterday, because they are not really predicting anything. They are just parroting out a journey that was established a while ago. One of the first things that's going to happen, and Adobe is already pushing this inside their stack, is you'll be able to generate journeys on the fly. So one of the biggest opportunities will be a reimagining of omni-channel away from just segmentation into purpose. The AI will be asked to guess, why are you here? What are you trying to do? And instead of just what you did yesterday, and I looked for a bottle of beer on Amazon, and it shows me the same bottle of beer again, even though I now have it. It may be asking, well, actually, what might have changed? So I would imagine what's going to happen in the first instance is there'll be a renewed and intensification of the retail e-commerce journeys. And the current marketing strategies of customer acquisition through social media, etc., are going to change as well. The sort of middle ground of the mid-scale influencers are going to be highly changed by generative AI. There's going to be a loss potentially in customer confidence in influencer tech. So there's some huge opportunities in what we see as the sort of e-commerce MarTech world coming. Later on, there's going to be some massive changes in architecture. It's going to drive a huge closure of the last legacy monolith systems, because you want to be able to wrap everything in microservices so the experience AI can generate new experiences on the fly. And then lastly, you're going to be looking at things that will be effectively turning these generative AIs on their heads and turning them almost into forensic AIs, where you'll be looking for patterns. Essentially, to use Donald Rumsfeld's very crude term, you'll be looking for unknown unknowns. You'll be using it to do data analytics in a way that hasn't really been done before. And a lot of the sort of data teams are jumping on AI as if it's just another data problem. That's usually a way, the fact of getting that we haven't fixed the original data problems that were there 30 years ago, that the data's not fresh and it's slow. But this is going to give you the ability to analyze and interact with customer bases, events, patterns in a way that we haven't seen before. So there's some huge opportunities without really getting into the transformation of business. They're just business as is that's going to be sort of better. It's a better mousetrap.
And voice commands. So, as a marketer,
it's quite good at it now. So already it's better than human beings at handwriting recognition and a bunch of other stuff. I suspect that voice recognition will truly become quite useful, but then there's a huge amount of stuff that'll have to go in there, and the governance of that is, again, people get somehow more attached to their voice data than they do to written stuff. People are quite happy to share loads of data with ChatGPT, as we saw with the Samsung engineers copying core IP. A lot of people get quite scared about sharing voice data, probably because it's a lot richer.
So the traditional kind of marketing services agencies are going to have to transform, right? If marketers are at some point in the near future going to be able to tell the technology what to do, set up a new journey.
It's kind of like a layer of abstraction. So I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who's a deep engineering guru last night, and the view is we've already stepped 5 or 6 levels away from the technology. You imagine the sort of bits and bytes at the bottom level. We've put levels on top. This is another layer of abstraction on top of that. But you can imagine a sort of world where, assuming that engineering is all plugged in and the factory is all working, the service designer, the product owner, and the UX person sit down. They have one workshop. At the end of the workshop, it's live. There's no translation event required. Now, you're going to have to get quite prescriptive about how you describe experiences. You're going to have to provide raw material to these AI factories in a way that they understand. But it's going to be that quick. And the AI will do the rest of the work. It will make it live in the way it wants. It will potentially look at what's the best public cloud to put it on, or private hybrid mix, how to make it live, which languages to use, which technology. But you might not be describing a journey, Alex. So at the moment, most marketing experiences describe a persona and a journey, realistically. Maybe a product interaction and purpose. But you're now going to be spending more time on describing the guardrails and the likes and wants of this experience, because the experience itself is going to be built on the fly and could be radically different for every one of your customers. So you're going to have to say, well, these are the constraints for that experience. Go generate in that box.
Yeah.
I wish, Mark. I wish. They're more of a, shall we say, a random. Could I get them all on the shelves?
Could you put them in color? You need to get them in color order or something.
Yeah, that makes it very easy to find a book when you want it that way, doesn't it?
Fascinating.
I have a question, kind of going back to someone had a comment. Jonathan had a comment about people losing their ability to think critically because we're just being fed information by AI, and it made me think about the ethics and these like guardrails that we're creating, because I think one of the things we're experiencing right now in the business economy is that we have set guardrails historically, except those guardrails are no longer continuing to keep us safe. And so now we're at a place where we have to question the guardrails that we set to figure out what are new guardrails that now make sense for this world that we live in. And I guess the question I'm pondering is that something AI is going to do? Because that's something that makes me think of iRobot, when they're like, well, you gave us the 3 rules, but here's actually the way that we interpret the 3 rules to keep you the most safe.
And I think sort of as the book collections behind me indicate, I collect science fiction, I collect stuff. Any truly intelligent thing would go straight around those rules. You can't hardwire in at the base. You can always get around it. And even the filters that they put in ChatGPT, people can get around that, even though they're hardwired in. So I think it's going to be a different dialogue with whatever AI turns into. And it's going to be, as probably best expressed by Neil Asher, one of the authors behind me, we will become more like our tools, and our tools will become more like us. And how far we go along that journey is going to be really the dialogue we're going to have. Because at some point, if we do trigger a self-aware AI, by luck or by planning or bad luck, it's going to have a dialogue with us. And that dialogue is going to have to be pretty based on, we didn't treat you like you were awful, and we don't expect this. But to your point of some of the things, human beings' mind is going to change. Intelligence is an emergent property. And if it is an emergent property in the ways, it's interaction with ourselves. So as you say, we might think very differently in 100 years' time. If you took patterns of thinking behavior between somebody from the 1850s and somebody now, there's going to be strong and profound differences in the way we think about it. But those things are generally quite positive. If you imagine in 1850, the balance of ethical behavior, thou shalt not do to another, is wildly different than it was then. But in 150 years' time, or even 25, there's going to be different. So TikTok, for example, has been accused of shortening attention spans and leading to dumbing down. I haven't done the analytics on it, though. TikTok does hoover an immensely large amount of data. You can make some pretty profound predictions. But social media itself has had a difference on the way we're thinking. The sort of use of a very short form communication is going to be different. What it could find actually is that the AI brings us back to being able to think, because it will focus us potentially on the bits that human beings are really good at, which is the hard rationality stuff. Now, most humans find that very difficult, but being able to just, how we say, do mental judo with the universe and deliver deep mathematical and philosophical answers or discover something, the AIs we have at the moment aren't going to be very good at that. But they may be able to do a lot of the heavy lifting and stuff that we don't particularly want to do.
Can I share with you my dystopian nightmare for what the future will look like? And you can tell me whether or not this is... So this is based on previous revolutions that we've had.
Mm-hmm.
So many years ago, we built a society which is pretty much like it is now. So some people did manual work in the fields, tilling the fields and bringing in the harvest. And then along came mechanized farming, and all of those people had to be rehomed somewhere else. So they all fled to the city, and in the city they got jobs where the muscles they were using were their brains rather than their arms and their legs. So what they would do is they would do bookkeeping. and they would do legal work, and they would do writing for newspapers, and all of these other mental tasks. And that was a safe haven because you can do the work of 20 fit men with a simple combine harvester, but the machine was never going to do the thinking part. And there was a requirement as we became a larger economy, there is a requirement for that. Now, this is tackling all of those low-level jobs. You know, if you're a content writer, actually just ask GPT to ChatGPT to write all of your content for you. So I can now write the content of everybody in this chat room. I can write the content. I can write it faster and with fewer typos than all of you guys. It may not be as high quality, but actually that doesn't matter because we've already said that it's artificial stupidity, and the audience is not smart enough to spot that in many cases. So given that that's the global framework, all of a sudden there aren't going to be any safe jobs for people to go to. Yes, there will be jobs for people like you, people that say, I'm going to put.
There is going to be societal change, and I totally buy there is a huge societal change that's going to be driven by this. But in the end, we only get wealthier through productivity improvement. I don't believe in.
But do we get wealthier? Because my point is that now we're in a situation where we have greater wealth disparity than we've ever had.
I would actually challenge you on that one. I mean, I would say that the wealth disparity in the 1860s, in, shall we say, with the robber barons of northern England, compared to the conditions in the rookeries, was pretty much, it was higher. The Gini indexes were certainly worse then.
Okay, but certainly things haven't improved. And what we've seen is we've seen concepts like trickle-down economics, where the idea is that if the people at the top get richer, the people at the bottom get richer as well. And it's not a political comment.
No, and I take that, absolutely take this.
And what we see is that when the cup at the top gets full, it doesn't overflow. It just simply gets bigger.
You get a bigger cup.
And now these people are going to continue to become more powerful. The Bill Gateses of the world that run Microsoft will have all of the power.
I think.
And people like us can be reduced to bits and bytes.
And I think I would say that, I mean, my position is I'm relentlessly optimistic. Change can always be managed. With a bit of thought, you can always sort it. But the thing is, I would say is that it's more likely that the robber barons at the top, the billionaire class, will be disrupted first and hardest by this, because an awful lot of their
Why is that?
The ability for small organizations to innovate and then do the difficult bit, which is execution. There are a billion great ideas a day, of which 10 get implemented because execution is really hard. That gap just dropped vastly. So if the sort of multi-billionaires at the top are thinking that AI is somehow going to entrench their wealth, it will not. It will open them up to competition in a more profound way than they've ever seen, because every entrepreneur can now spin up a business faster, get to clients, as you say, create the hardest bit, the first step, which is reaching out to 100 clients. You can now do that faster. What will happen is some form of regulation will be put in which appears to protect either privacy or the rights of data, which will actually seek to entrench power. But in a purist form, this opens up an awful lot of competition because the productivity step is so much larger. And I think for those jobs that have been imperiled, I think that you mentioned the start of the sort of drift from agriculture. We've improved productivity of American fields has gone up by 1,900% per acre and has gone up by 150,000% by person hour. That's the ability to create an unbelievable calorie wealth. Obviously, obesity as well is probably a challenge. One of the things that's going to come is that scale of the people that moved from agricultural, then through manufacturing, and then into servicing. There will be another drift as people get realigned. But certainly a lot of the things that have been potentially tasked as a safe job or an easy job because they are using your hand and it's indoor work, safe, they're going to be changed. But I wouldn't say that we're going to see like digital clearances. There won't be people made homeless in the same ways of some of those more crude things, because we're starting to think about these things a bit in advance.
I genuinely hope you're right. You know, I genuinely hope you're right. But I guess the question is, so these people will, you know, it will profoundly change many of these industries. These industries that are, you can think of it as an intellectual factory. You know, if you're a lawyer, if you're a conveyancing solicitor, you're basically working in a factory, albeit a factory where you're using your head rather than your hands.
Absolutely, and they're going to be changed.
So where are those people going to go to?
There will be new jobs that we have no idea about. We described a scenario that somebody has to now create complex ethical architectures. That's not an easy job, but could be something that somebody with a trained legal mind could very easily adapt to. One of the things I spoke about towards the end of the sort of 2019 was the idea of lawyers evolving into sort of legal programmers or legal engineers, because contracts have to be executed in a system, not just between two organizations. There will be changes and shifts in plans, but the skills at the core of what these people are doing will not change. They are analytical. They can gauge and weigh evidence and advice. They can seek out and understand a need or a requirement, and they can translate that through to a system that enacts it. To be honest, I don't spend a huge amount of time as a blacksmith, but I know how to cook. I've never made a knife. So that productivity is still going to be there. The skill is still going to be there in whatever the lawyer is, even if you're potentially further away from what you previously thought was your occupation. You may not be spending as much time crafting contracts. You may be spending much more time with clients trying to seek an agreement before that contract.
So that comment.
Yeah. If one thing.
Jess.
Let's
Yes,
read it out loud.
That is the opportunity that I see for humanity. We have very complex problems that we need to deal with. Complex problems today, and we've got some serious problems on the horizon, particularly as it relates to our climate and the transformation of the global economy. And so I think that AI can help the individual with a tremendous amount of productivity. But what it can't do is the complex problem solving and the creative thinking that humans can do. And so the opportunity for like that group of people who maybe have easy jobs that AI can take, or even the lawyer where 50% of their job is going to go away because AI can support that. Those people need to develop more creative thinking skills and more collaborative skills where people have to come together to solve complex problems. So that's, you know, as I've been listening and thinking about these issues on my own, that's really where I see the opportunity. And I think Ed is right that very large organization, I actually wrote this somewhere to someone this morning, that I think over the next 10 years to 15 years, we're going to see creative destruction accelerate, that small teams who think creatively, work to or know how to work together collaboratively with AI are going to be able to take market share from large organizations, because those organizations are unwilling to change because of the entrenched power. And
I totally agree with that, Leonard. It's the future's then. There's going to be challenges in this roadmap. As Rob's just put one up there about bad actor risk. There's cyber, there's ethics, there's change. But in the end, this is going to free us up in ways that we've never seen before. And one of the perennial debates I have in this house is the future of education and how it would change if every child has got an AI pretty much from birth that can answer any question and advise and tailor a lesson to exactly what they want to hear. What's that going to do to our learning pathways and generations? The role of the teacher then becomes less of a sort of a teaching by rote, as more of a mentor or a true coach. And if you can look at organizations that have had a very static productivity line going forward, there's going to be huge opportunities to change. Certainly the AIs in medical care are going to transform. They're going to transform how law works. They're going to transform how businesses work, how we interact with many people. The AIs may be given limited or increasing autonomy that can do more stuff for us and say, yeah, Ed, I'm your AI that sits in your phone. I've made us $5 a day by just sharing information that we had. Those opportunities are going to come forward, but there will be a vast rank of opportunities we can't see yet. At the moment, to use that whole thing, is we're in a gold rush and we're desperately trying to be the people that sell the shovels to the miners. And actually, the real wealth is going to come after that. In the sort of gold rich terminology, it was the water rights. We don't yet know what's going to come out of this. There could be so many opportunities we have no idea about it. And to Adam's your point, yeah, the copywriting job may go the same way as the architectural modeler did when 3D printing came along, but there will be something else because those skills became transferable to other areas. That
I think this is.
Sorry, go on. Tracy.
I was just so one of the comments that Jonathan had earlier on about so I'm a marketer. He said some may say that perhaps marketers are going to become just operators of dashboards. And one of the things that I think that's interesting about this is that marketers have always been like very adaptable, right? Like marketing is one of the arenas where there's constantly a new thing and we have to adapt to it and learn new technology. And it's just really interesting to me because the foundation of marketing hasn't changed since before the invention of advertising, right? It's like people connecting with people, showing you trust what you have. And and there's going to be with AI a new interpretation of that potentially, or a new way that we create that. But people are actually pretty good at evolving, right? Yeah. And so I think that specifically, I wanted to call out that marketing piece because I've read a lot about how AI is going to make like content creators disappear. And I don't think that's true. I think it's going to make them evolve.
Yeah, you're going to have to be more like content programmers or content architects. You're going to have to tell the AIs the types of content it has to create. The AI might be creating the content, but it's kind of the evolution is every time we get a new productivity step, we abstract ourselves one level further on. And as you say, human beings are very, very good at this, very good at evolving, particularly marketing where everybody is the sort of cult of the creative is so important, that there is the ability to come up with a new answer, a new solution, a new opportunity. What AI gives us is a vast ability to create stuff which has otherwise been a bit of a drudge. And we can get on and crack on and do more stuff. It's going to give us more and more ability for us to execute in new ways, faster, quicker, better. And as we trust it more, we give ourselves more, or rather give ourselves permission to give more autonomy to the AI. They're going to do more for us. And some of the things that, I mean, I, for one, will not mourn when driving goes away.
Me neither.
Well,
I
have been saying that for a while. What I do dread, though, Ed, is the integration. When we still have humans and AI on the road simultaneously.
And that
will be dreadful.
If the AI is a better driver than a human, which isn't that difficult from some of the driving I see, then it's going to be no worse than just putting another driver there. I think that to many of the comments and questions on this one is where are the systemic risks? Where are the gotchas that we didn't know about? So in the case of a car, how do you put what does it behavior if it loses power? Does it stop? Does it put the brakes on? What is it doing? And Mark's just put up that the Ford has just been approved for motorway driving with hands-free. So you still got to have your eyes on the road, but it's got behaviors in it. So if the driver doesn't react properly, it starts slowing down gradually. So those fail-safe pathways are going to have to be designed in anywhere where we've got situations which are mixed human beings and AIs in anything safety critical. So medical care, AI psychiatry is one that's been mentioned in quite a few areas.
AI psychiatry.
Yeah.
The concept is hilarious.
That makes me think of Lucy from Peanuts with her 5-cent advice.
Well, it's quite interesting, actually, Tracy and Adam, is that some early studies suggest that human beings find it easier to trust an AI because they know they're not going to be judged. Therefore, they give better data than they give to a therapist, psychotherapist, or a psychiatrist, and therefore get better results because they're more honest with the AI because they know the AI can't judge. But it's an interesting because that then opens up the sort of next thing, which is artificial emotional intelligence, which is something that we're nowhere near as advanced with as trying to do AI. And therefore, that's another wave that will put it through.
Have you got something to say?
Yeah, it was just really Ed, around the topic of you saying about the self-driving car and kind of for myself, I sit here and think, well, yeah, it's great. People, they don't have to drive a car, but then what opportunity does that open up for someone to hack into that person's car to then put the accelerator full way down and then they have no control over that? Same with the house as well as if you have your lights and your heating controlled on your phone, why can't someone hack into that, open your front door if you've got your front door on that app, or turn your lights off or turn them on, and they run up your electricity bill?
So I think there's always going to be gotchas across it, and the fail-safe path wins the security is put through. In general, most security failures at scale have gone through social engineering rather than hacking the device. In many cases, AI systems might be harder to fool than a human being. I mean, most cases, people phoning up going, "I'm the CEO, give me my password right now," type stuff. That's almost social engineering might be very difficult to do with an AI. So they may, to a degree, become their own watchdogs. But to your point, is any safety critical system which has automation and autonomy in it has to be fully modeled. All of those behaviors happen. So there may be systems inside the car that watch the behavior, or inside your house that watch behaviors and go, well, actually, this is outside of the norm. This is not what we predicted. Therefore, let's enact some sort of safety or fail-safe.
So, Jensen, I've actually interviewed a guy on my podcast who's a CEO of a startup, and all they do is cybersecurity on cars.
Yeah,
it's totally focused on that.
Okay.
I just have Jonathan and I are just on the same wavelength in this chat today, because what he's saying is that, and I agree with what you said, Ed, about the AI psychotherapy being less judgmental. So my question is, if AI can be non-judgmental, how come a person can't be non-judgmental? Maybe that's the conversation.
It may be actually that's quite a fundamental thing. If we want our AIs to become more like us, maybe they have to become judgmental. Being judgmental may be being a part of consciousness, because it's a kind of an internal mirror of the world. But absolutely, in a perfect world, a psychiatrist should never be judgmental. But I suspect all human beings are failed.
It's just interesting. An interesting.
So Ed, I don't know about you, but I've really enjoyed today. I don't know about the audience and stuff.
Absolutely.
Are you going to do a podcast on this or something?
Yes, with you next week.
Oh, are you? Oh, right.
Yes, it's amazing.
Why didn't you tell everybody about that?
Yes, we've got a podcast next week, and we're going to do it once every couple of weeks to discuss the state of change in AI transformation, because this is going to be a very exciting roller coaster we're all on, folks. And it's certainly going to keep us all busy in thinking and technology and business for the next 25, 30 years until the next thing comes along.
Nice. So is that Thursday the 20th at
it is at
3 o'clock UK time?
3 o'clock GMT, yeah, or BST. Yes, it is.
How nice. Well, we'll all be tuning in for that.
Fantastic.
Did you say BST? That's
British
BS
summertime.
time?
British summertime.
Yeah.
BST, British summertime.
Yes. You've been an absolutely fantastic guest. This has been so informative. And
thank you very much. Thank you for having me, folks.
The comments from the audience have just been absolutely fantastic. So in a few weeks' time, would you come back and do another one with us?
More than happy. More than happy. I like talking about stuff I like talking about.
Well, I think what's really interesting is that this is one of those areas where everybody has an opinion. Everybody has a position on this. It's either this is a great opportunity, this is something I'm really scared of, or I'd like to know more about this in order that I can have an opinion, which is I'm scared about it or I'm really excited about it. And I think that the important takeaway for everybody in the audience and watches the podcast and everybody on the panel is that this is going to happen, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you can't hold back the tide. This is going to happen, and you either have to get on the program or you have to go and live in the woods in a wooden shack off grid.
It's the moment that it hits a certain level, which I think we're well past.
So one of the comments that Ed said on my podcast was that in 1985 we had a job which was an administrator
or a clerk.
There were people who were secretaries who typed things for you. In 1995, they'd all gone.
Yeah, and it was that quick.
Because what happened was the word processor came along, then the PC came along, and that job. And we, if you say to people, the fact that you're thinking about someone else doing your typing is 25% of the salespeople in the company that I worked with when we had PCs resigned because they said, I don't do typing, I'm a salesman. Yeah. And they went to work for companies that don't exist anymore. But the point being is that that change took place in 10 years.
Yeah.
And it's going to be faster than that.
I think it's going to be quite a lot faster, actually, Tim, because we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg. And on average, there are 1,000 new AI companies starting up around the planet on a daily basis. That amount of creativity, powered by the fact you can actually do stuff quite quickly with this, is going to lead to profound change in very short orders.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you so much, Ed.
Yes.
Thank you very much for having me.
And for Adam for running it, and all the questions, the panel, and all the discussion. It's been
And most of all, Rob, for coming up with the idea when we were discussing it.
yes.
So yeah, thank you all very much. Thank you very much, everyone in the audience.
Thank you very much indeed.
Great to be part of this, and we'll see you all again soon. Bye bye.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.